Hello, everyone. I'm Siddharthan Managuru. I'll be chairing the event today. So I welcome everyone to the inaugural Tamil annual lecture series. We want to start our event with a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. The university that we attend is located on the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississauga of the Credit, a space that binds us to share the territory and protect the land. Today, this space continues to be the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. As we meet as students, staff, and faculty of university, we ask that you reflect upon yourself and the land that you are on how we honor this land with gratitude for the Indigenous communities who have tended to it for generations, and how we committed to continuing to learn how to be better tenants of the land we inhabit as well. We ask that you reflect on what you are doing to demonstrate respect and responsibility to the land that you are on. So this year, Tamil Studies, as part of the Global Asian Studies program in the Historical and Cultural Studies Department at the University of Toronto, Scarborough, in collaboration with the South Asian Center at the Asia Institute at the University of Toronto, is launching an annual Tamil Studies lecture series. Tamil Studies at UTSC takes an interdisciplinary approach as the core of Tamil research, teaching, and learning. In the development of the multidisciplinary approach to Tamil Studies, a number of initiatives have been initiated by the University of Toronto and its various faculties for decades, starting with the late Professor Chelva Kannanayagam, who was also a former director of the Center for South Asian Studies. Building on the long tradition, we are launching the annual Tamil Studies lecture series this year, which will annually invite distinguished scholars who work on the Tamil communities or scholarship from various disciplines to create conversation on Tamil worlds. To inaugurate this lecture series and kickstart the discussion, we are starting with the language of Tamil art. Furthermore, I'm also happy to launch this annual Tamil Studies lecture series in January, Tamil Heritage Month in Canada. I am honored to present our first speaker for the series, Professor T. Sanathanan. Professor T. Sanathanan is a world-renowned visual artist and a professor of art history in the Department of Fine Arts at the University of Jaffna, Sri Lanka. His artworks have been exhibited widely in Sri Lanka and across the world, such as at the Museum of Anthropology at UBC Vancouver, Queensland Art Gallery, Museum of Ethnology Vienna, Devi Art Foundation New Delhi, Asian Art Archive Hong Kong, Museum of Modern Art New York, Lahore Biennale, Dhaka Art Summit, Saja Art Biennale, among others. His artist book project includes the one-year drawing project, The Incomplete Tambu, which is an incredible book that speaks about home, displacement, and memory, and A to Z of conflict. He is also the author of several articles and book chapters on modern contemporary visual art in Sri Lanka. He received his PhD in art history from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Sanathanan is one of the co-founders of Sri Lankan Archive for Contemporary Art, Architecture, and Design in Jaffna, and the founder of Kolam Craft Initiative. I now call upon Professor Sanathanan to deliver his talk titled Burden of Identities, Art in 20th Century of Tamil World.
Good evening. Thank you, Siddharthan, for that elaborate introduction. Thank you all for coming in a kind of bad weather to listen to me. I also, first of all, thank the organizers for this rare opportunity, and I consider this as a great honor, especially Siddharthan, Kondi, and Bhavani for this opportunity. Thank you very much. Today, I'm going to talk about a topic which is still we as a South Asians grapple with how to bring identity in our art. I don't know whether other communities are having this problem, and also in terms of in the discussions of modernism, this was not a question, but South Asian modernism is actually still tackling with that question. In 1995, when I was an undergraduate student at Delhi University, just a month before the Ulam War III, I attended a meeting organized by the University of Jaffna Department of Fine Arts. Jaffna was then under LTT administration. And the artistic activity was deeply entangled with Tamil nationalism. The meeting focused on the question of Tamil identity in visual art, drawing many of the region's leading artists, academics, and students. This conversation recalls earlier debate in South Asian art history from 1930s Bengal to post-1960s Madras, where artists grapple with the question of Indianness and regional identity. Across these contexts, authenticity has remained as a persistent pressure. As both as an artist and an artistry student, I continue to encounter this demand from public institutions and art market. Modern discussion on Tamil identity has remained closely tied with language. The tripartite division of EL, literature, Isai, music, and Nadagam, drama, popularized in 1930s, reinforced these linguistic emphases. Although the same movement celebrates the visual achievement of Chola, Chera, and Pandya periods, these traditions were never gained the canonical status granted to the literature, leaving modern visual art outside the symbolic center of Tamil identity. Yet visual art has continually engaged with the production and circulation and consumption of Tamilness, often with a greater experimentation than the literary sphere. Existing scholarship tends to isolate specific artists or movements, leaving the broader visual landscape of the Tamil world unexplored. This presentation addressed the gap by tracing through selected examples from Chennai and Jaffna from the late 19th century to today, how artists, institutions, and communities and the political regimes have contested, and strategically mobilized authenticity in Tamil identity in 20th century visual art. Colonial modernity inaugurated a new regime of subject formation in South Asia by transforming the pre-modern social distinctions, one situational, relational, and embedded in local life worlds, into a stable governmental identities through the apparatus of census, ethnography, and administrative enumeration. Colonial power produced identity as an object of knowledge, rendering populations legible to the state. In Foucauldian term, identity became an effect of governmentality, a technology through which bodies, communities, and histories were disciplined, classified, and made productive for imperial governments. Post-colonial nationalism inherited and intensified these classificatory logics. The nation form demand a coherent semiotic field and achieve of origins continuous historical narrative and a homogeneous cultural body. Identities that had once circulated as flexible social markers were saturated to essentialize notions of race, caste, language, and territory. Orientalist philology and the racial anthropology further sedimented these categories by aligning linguistic families with curative racial essence, thereby naturalizing what were, in fact, epistemic constructions of colonial power. Within this discursive terrain, art became a privileged semiotic surface upon which the nation inscribed its imagined coherence. Visual culture functioned as the aesthetic body of the nation state, materializing collective identity through symbolic form. Yet modernism, particularly in the Euro-American articulation, foregrounded an autonomous subject, the expressive individual, and the primacy of formal experimentation. Artists in colonial and post-colonial contexts were thus positioned at the intersections of two competing regimes of subjectivity, the collectivizing demand for nation or the region and the individualizing imperatives of the modernism. This produces a constitutive tension. The artist as both bearer of the national identity and the agent of subjective freedom. Tradition in this context ceased to be the stable inheritance and instead become a kind of strategic signifier, mobilizing, reconfigured, and contested with a semiotic economy of modernity. The presentation of identity in modern South Asia thus proliferate across the multiple axes: regionalism, subnationalism, linguistic formations, caste and ethnic imaginaries, and the shifting alignments of political regimes. The popular. The major shift in the artistic tradition of South Asia happened through the assimilation of European mode of visual representationalism. The proliferation of representational mode through the mediums like photography and printing, their ubiquitous presence in the all sections of the society, and its association with the colonial power established as an authentic and progressive artistic form. Injecting representationalism happened in South Asia through different processes, through direct sources like colonial lifestyle, prints and photography, and art schools set up in colonial cities. In Tamil-speaking region of South Asia, Tanjavur painting underwent a significant transformation during the 18th century Maratha period through the incorporation of European illusionism and representational techniques. This stylistic shift continued into the company school of painting, produced by artists trained in Tanjavur tradition, whose work created for European patrons demonstrate an eclectic synthesis of local iconographic conventions and foreign aesthetic sensibilities. The hybrid visual language that emerged from the encounter later resurfaced in temple murals, Periyaluthu Puthagam, illustrations, and eventually expanded into the calendar art industry, centered in Pillayarpatti near Madurai. As the calendar art market grew, it extended beyond the Tamil-speaking region by adopting pan-Indian popular visual tropes. This rise of mechanical reproduction and rapid expansion of printing industry played a crucial role in shaping the modern imagination of Tamil's selfhood through these widely circulated images. Over the time, the visual items of the calendar and the bazaar art came into perceived by ordinary viewers as tradition, despite their hybrid and relatively recent origin. With the visual economy, the figure of Tamil Thai With the visual economy, the figure of Tamil Thai, rendered in the polished realism characterized of calendar art, emerged through the Saiva Tamil and Dravidian ideological movements as both condensation of the conceptual framework of Tamil identity and an embodiment of popular visual idiom through which that identity was disseminated. As artist Tursky Marudu notes, painters such as Selvam and Madhavan mobilized the stylistic convention of the calendar art to advance to the Dravidian ideology of Periyar. Subsequently, the Dravidian movement transformed the earlier iconoclast politics of the Periyar movement into a culture of political icon worship using the same popular realistic aesthetic. Development of cinema industry further complicates this icon worship. The liberation tigers of Tamilam likewise employ the similar visual strategies for political communication and propaganda. It is in this broader context that K. Sivathambi characterized Tamil culture as an iconic culture shaped by the pervasive power of image in articulating collective identity. Similar to the Maratha period paintings of Tamil Nadu, Muthaiya Duraisamy was known pioneer painters in Jaffna, effectively adapted this style for depiction of local life as well as the Hindu religious storytelling much before the influence of Raja Ravi Varma's religious prints. His wall painting is public space like temples, madams and chatrams, Kittangis, while setting up values and ethics of the new middle class influenced by the Saiva revivalism of Armuga Navalar, also become the signs of new growing taste. His paintings transformed the anclinized identity of the colonial town of Jaffna into a local identity through the naturalistic rendering of Hindu mythological characters and contemporary scenes. Pathamitar interpret the establishment of colonial art school in India as a direct intervention into the region's artistic tradition. The first institution founded in 1852 in the colonial city of Madras was initially to train local craftsmen into produce utilitarian objects for the English community. Over the time, however, the school underwent a profound transformation under the leadership of Devi Prasad Roy Chowdhury. A student of Rabindranath Tagore, Roy Chowdhury introduced ideas shaped by the Indian nationalism and cultural revivalism, echoing the development already underwent in Calcutta. His reforms not only reoriented the school's pedagogical and aesthetic direction, but also disrupt the entrenched caste hierarchies that had long governed the production and the consumption of traditional art. S.A. Kanakasabai, a charismatic artist and the influential art educator in Jaffna, Sri Lanka, was trained at the Madras College of Art, Madras School of Arts and Craft. Through his involvement with Ceylon Art Club, established in 1923 in Colombo, he redirected the tools of colonial art education towards the formation of the local aesthetic identity. SRK was deeply inspired by C.R. Windsor, the colonial art inspector of the school, who himself drew from the Indianizing initiative of E.B. Havel at the Calcutta College of Art and the pedagogical experimentation of Shantiniketan under Rabindranath Tagore in 1920s. As Windsor's retirement in 1934, SRK founded a Windsor Art Club in Jaffna to continue the modernist indigenizing project. He was also a member of the Sri Lanka's first avant-garde collective called the 43 Group, formed in 1943 in Colombo, and influenced by the Parisian modernist painters. Together with his gifted students, S.R. Kanaka Sapapati and Ambalavana Rasaya, SRK localized Western oil paintings techniques and the perpetual habit associated with them. Although their subjects were primarily local landscape and portraits of contemporaries, their work enacted that what Geeta Kapoor's write in Raja Ravi Verma's case describes as stealing the fire for his people, appropriating foreign material and representational modes to depict their own environment. SRK's landscape, through the thematic choice and compositional clarity and formal simplification, exemplify a distinctly modernist sensibility. Kanaka Sapapati's bold experiments with form draw from the Cubism, Expressionism, and Expressionism position him as a pioneering modernist within the Tamil-speaking world. This deliberate aesthetic objectification of their surrounding of pictorial consumption produce a new relationship between self, place, and representation. It marks a shift from seeing the landscape as lived experience to seeing it as a subject of modern artistic inquiry. Madras Movement. Madras School of Arts and Craft became the locus for the emergence of a distinctive art movement in South India during 1960s, later known as Madras Movement. As the only institution offering European modes of art education in the region until the late 1960s, it attracted students from across Madras Presidency and the southern states of Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu. Under the charismatic leadership of K.C.S. Panikkar, who succeeded his teacher D.P. Roy Chowdhury, the school was reoriented towards a new ideological and aesthetic direction. Responding to the nationalist and orientalist call for the Indian art rooted in tradition, Panikkar experiments with Parisian modernist approaches, steering the institution away from the naturalism and romanticism towards the modernism informed by local tradition. Artists associated with Madras movement consciously drew from the reference and the inspiration from regional religious mythology, as well as folk and tribal art, such as terracotta images, puppetry, wood carving, kolam floor decoration, tantric jantras, astrological diagrams, kalamkari cloth paintings, and metal works and stone carving. Their formalistic engagement with tradition deliberately extract the visual from the ritual or narrative context in an effort to trace the cultural root, imagine as untouched by European colonialism. This pursuit of pure tradition was deeply influenced by the writings of nationalist and Orientalist thinkers such as Ananda Kumar Swami. Panikkar, for his abstract canvas painting, took inspirations and references from the signs and symbols and textual arrangements of the yantras or horoscopes. His well-known series called Signs and Symbols mark his personal as well as South Indian identity in art within the larger Indian modern art. His large canvases were visually made impressive through the impressions of Malayalam text, signs and symbols without their traditional literal meaning. Panikkar not only played upon the abstraction of the words and the scripts, but also incorporate mathematical formulas, diagrams of horoscopes. So, and followed by Panikkar, there are other artists like Srinivasalu, who actually draw inspiration from the folk art from Andhra Pradesh. Similarly, A.P. Perumal's work, Perumal actually painted the village scenes of Tamil Nadu with these elongated, simplified images. So here, village became a content of modernist painter. M. Redappa Naidu also followed the Panikkar's path and create his own myth based on the Hindu mythology, incorporating letters and scripts and images. Muralidharan much later actually incorporate these childlike paintings like with Hindu mythology, Tamil writings in a kind of disconnective way and painted a kind of a mythological landscapes. And many of the South Indian, the writings about Madras school actually talk about the linearity or the linear character of the traditional Tamil painting. So many of them actually preoccupied with the drawing, black and white drawings. So this is Ramanujam actually playing with a kind of a mythical kind of architectural space drawn from 17th, 19th century mural tradition. Adi Moolam actually took his inspiration from local folk and like puppets, kolam designs, and food carvings. So these are some of Adi Moolam's drawings. So while painters were trying to draw inspiration from folk and myth, sculptors actually took material as a kind of a marker of ethnicity. This is the prime changer in the whole school was his vice principal, Sri Dhanapal. This is Dhanapal's works actually depicting terracotta and making the image of Avvayar in a kind of a different kind of portrayal of Avvayar in terracotta, and his experimentation then later followed by his students. He also experimented with traditional copper objects. So his experimentation then later followed by his student Janagiram and making these reverse sculptures, convex kind of shapes, influenced by the Tamil traditional embossing methods. Again, from the traditional stone carving, Dakshinamurti took his inspiration, and he communicate emotions through the kind of a sizzle marks of the traditional and the modernist kind of a combination. This is the Murkaya's work. Like Dakshinamurti, Murkaya actually played with the idea of folk and traditional drummers and village scenes were portrayed in his terracotta sculptures. This is Vidyashankar Stapati. Vidyashankar Stapati actually came from a kind of a traditionally metal casting family occupied with temple craft making. But he actually situated his traditional language into a kind of modernist aesthetics. So later on, this K.C. Spanikar and his colleagues actually set up an art village near Madras, outside of Madras city, called Cholamandala Artist Village. So it's itself a kind of very romantic idea about village and the authenticity of village, and also the whole naming of Cholamandalam is also reflect how they actually how the past becomes so important to this artist group. Although Periyar social justice movement sought to carve a Dravidian identity in the Madras presidency, its impact on Madras movement was limited. Positioned within an art world centered in art market of Bombay and Delhi, the movement largely addressed the urban elite. Its nativism and invented tradition was at an attempt to assert an exclusive regional identity within the larger Indian framework. Artistic choice reflect the search for tradition imagined as untouched by the colonial city culture, with the village becoming a symbolic center. Many artists themselves, from the rural background, objectified and museumized elements of village life under the modernist fascination with the primitivism. The Madras movement initially addressed the English-speaking urban elites through city galleries and government college of art. Its aim was to carve out a regional identity rather than an exclusive Tamil identity. The ideas of Madras movement reached the wider Tamil public only in 1970s, when artists began to collaborate with writers in the little magazine milieu. The shift expanded its resonance, linked visual art with literary discourses, and embedding it more deeply within Tamil cultural life. Drawing by Adi Moolam, R.K. Bhaskaran, and Dakshinamurthy appeared as covers and illustration in the little magazines, such as Kasadu Para, Nadai, and La, often reproduced from the independent works due to the financial constraints. Adi Moolam's pioneered this practice, introducing distinctive calligraphic style inspired by stone inscriptions and manuscripts as an alternative to standardized fonts of printing industry. The style of Tamil lettering became a kind of hallmark of avant-garde Tamil literature by the 1980s. As writers from the little magazine world entering the mainstream weeklies, artists followed the suit. Adi Moolam and Turkish Marudu extended the new aesthetic and to the popular weeklies like Ananda Vihad and Kumudam and Kungumam. While Marudu's experimentation with mixed media and early computer graphics, he remained rooted in tradition, drawing on classical and folk forms of Tamil Nadu. His images of local kings and queens reoriented Tamil visual culture away from the conventions of Parsi theatre and cinematic imagination. Popular sculptures, from literature to performance. Classical Tamil literature played a distinctive role in shaping Tamil identity. With the expansion of print culture in the early 20th century, invented texts such as Tirukural, Tiruvasakam, Naladiyar, Chilapadikaram, and Kambaramayinam gained wide circulation, and their authors become symbolic anchors of collective identity. This canonization generated a demand for monumental portraits of figures like Avayar, Thiruvalluvar, Kambar, and Ilanguadigal. Unlike devotional icons of Nayanmar and Alvars, these portraits were imaginative reconstruction in realistic or partly photographic style, circulated through book illustrations and calendar art. Assembling even non-reading accessible even to non-reading public, these become emblem of Tamil culture and pride in Dravidian linguistic heritage. Venugopala Sharma's paintings of Thiruvalluvar set a template for later visualization while Aware Image, portrayed by K.P. Sundarambal's performance in Shanmugam's 1953 drama and film, established a lasting model for imaging the ancient poetry. These modern inventions became the authoritative visual anchors for Tamil cultural memory. The Second World Tamil Conference in Chennai, held in 1968 under the agencies of newly elected DMK government led by C.N. Annadurai, became the major occasion of monumentalization of Tamil cultural pride. To mark the event, a series of statues of scholars who had contributed to the growth of Tamils were installed along the sea front of Chennai, the modern Tamil capital. These sculptures depicted figures including Thiruvalluvar, Vilanguvadigal, Kambar, Bharatiyar, Bharatidasan, and even European Tamil scholars such as G.U. Pope and Robert Colwell. The literary heroine Kannaki was also introduced, signaling the importance of epic imagination of Tamil cultural identity. The installation of statues along the Marina Beach can be read as an effort to reclaim the colonial space as both national and regional. Historically, Marina was the site of major colonial and national institutions, as well as prominent leisure ground, and its long function as a competitive area for staging identity and power. The first statue erected there was Queen Victoria, commemorating the 50th year of coronation. Later, monuments of Gandhi, omnipresent, Vivekananda marked the beach as a part of the national imaginary. Again, this backdrop, the installation of Tamil literary figures in 1968 assert the Tamil pride and linguistic cultural sovereignty, paralleling post-independence practice of renaming streets, parks, and institutions to reflect the regional identity. In the mid-1920s, in 2000, a new phase began when the artist Chandrasekhar Chandru, then principal of College of Art, was invited to beautify the Chennai with public sculptures. Between 2007 and 2010, Chandru and his students foreground Tamil folk performing arts in installing statues of Karagam, Puliyattam, Poikal Kudure, Kuthu, Panchavatyam, and Marapachi across the city. This monumentalization of folk art within the metropolitan environment served a dual function, reminding the audience of vanishing tradition while transforming dynamic performance into a static emblems of heritage. Revival of classicism. In the reconstruction of classical past gained prominence as part of the broader projects of building identity through tradition. The logic of classicization shaped not only the Indian national project, but also regional articulation of Tamil identity. The striking example of South India is the official emblem of government of Tamil Nadu. As a complementary image of emblem of the Indian state, which featured the Mauryan period Ashoka pillar, the Tamil Nadu adopted the image of Kovil Gopuram in 1949, even before the formation of formal creation of the state in 1956. This choice of symbolize specifically Tamil nationalist longing rooted in classical Dravidian architectural form. During the 1950s, the Tamil Nadu government further consolidated this aesthetic orientation by commissioning the Gandhi Memorial in Chennai in so-called Dravidian style associated with the medieval temple architecture. As Mac Ray's noticed, this project marked the beginning of a renaissance in the traditional architectural and the Sapati practices across Tamil Nadu. In Jaffna, in Jaffna, instance, in 1950s, public institutions such as the public library, the Jaffna Municipal Council, and the railway station and the modern market adapted the elements of Dravidian architecture. In Tamil Nadu in 1956, immediately after the formation of the state, the government sculpture training center was established under the leadership of Vidyanand Stapati, the architect of Gandhi Memorial.
The institution aimed to revive the architecture, ancient traditional art of sculpture and architecture of Tamils by training the skilled personnel capable of sustaining the craftsmanship and the technologies for which the Tamil traditions had long been known. Located in the outskirts of Maballapuram, a site early Pallava period monuments, the center was later upgraded into a college under the Department of Art and Culture of Tamil Nadu government. Although there are no explicit restrictions on applicants from other castes or states, Tamil remains a medium of instruction. The hereditary Gurukula model of the Stapati lineage has been transformed through the modern pedagogical structures. The college played a significant role in articulating Tamil identity through neoclassical public architecture, contributing to projects such as Valluvar Kottam in Chennai, Poombugar Art Gallery, Tamil University in Tanjavur, Madurai Muthaiya Mandram, Anna Arch in Chennai, and the entrance arch of both Madurai Kamaraj University and Madras University. Ganapati Stapati assumed the leadership of the institution from his father in 1961 and continued to guide it successfully until his retirement in 1988. Among his most monumental state-sponsored projects were granite and concrete statues of Tamil poet Thiruvalluvar at Kanyakumari, unrevealed on the Millennium Day of 1st January 2000 by then Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, K. Karunanidhi. Although Karunanidhi first conceived this project in December 1975, and the Prime Minister Moradi Desai laid the foundation stone in 1979, in the presence of Chief Minister M.G. Ramachandran, the actual sculpturing under the direction of Ganapati Stapati began only in 1990. What is particularly significant in the deliberate choice of the classical sculpture idiom for the statue? The archive of to achieve this, Ganapati Stapati undertook a specialized research, including visiting Polonnaruwa in Sri Lanka to study the standing statue of Parakrama Bahu, depicted with Ola leaf in his hand. Drawing from the classical South Asian sculptural vocabulary, Ganapati Thiruvalluvar stand on the pedestal holding a palm leaf manuscript of Tirukkural. The statue is celebrated as one of the tallest stone structure in the world, positioned dramatically above the confluence of the three oceans at the India's southern tip. The stylistic and iconographic choice marked the conscious departure from the earlier popular representations of Thiruvalluvar, most notably Venugala Sharma's realistic seated portrait, which had been widely circulated and officially endorsed by the Tamil Nadu government, including through its reproductions on an Indian postal stamp. While numerous attempts had been made since the mid-19th century to visualize Valluvar, Venugopal's image had become the normative representation in the public sphere. Karunanidhi's own writing, however, consistently glorified the romanticized classical Tamil sculpture and the artistry of its carvers. His government repeatedly advocated for the recognition of Tamil as a classical language. The Thiruvalluvar statue that became the powerful convergence of these ideological commitments, the ancient classical literacy tradition, and the medieval classical sculptural and architectural heritage are brought together in a single monument form. Through this project, Karunanidhi's imagination of Tamil identity, rooted in antiquity, aesthetic classicism, and cultural pride, was materially and symbolically realized. Elam War. The popular realism of neoclassicism and formalism and the characterized imagination of Tamil identity underwent a radical return with the escalation of the Elam War. In response to the burning of the public library in 1981 and the Vedikare prison massacre and the 83 anti-Tamil program in southern Sri Lanka, Tamil Nadu artist Veera Santhanam and Sam Adakalasamy organized a painting exhibition in Chennai, Dalit Kala Academy. By confronting the brutalities of this prison, these artists positioned art as a tool of social criticism and human emancipation. Through this depiction of violence, loss, and despair, the formal order of the work registered a dramatic shift from earlier tradition, making a new phase in Tamil visual culture. A parallel shift unfolded in the works of young women artists active in Jaffna during the mid-1980s. informed by a range of freedom movements, including feminism. These artists deliberately introduce unorthodox perspectives shaped by the socio-political urgencies of their time. Their insistence on the now and here mark the decisive methodological break, grounding artistic practice in living experience rather than inherited aesthetics or cultural traditions. Arundhati Sabhanathan offered a compelling example. In one painting, she portrayed a disfigured weeping woman before the scattered door inscribed with Hindi letters, an oblique yet unmistakable reference to the presence of the Indian peacekeeping force in Jaffna. In another work, she responded to the assassination of Rajini Thiranagama, the human rights activist, academic, and young mother, capturing the moment where personal grief converged with a collective mourning. Arundhati herself noted these works sought to shift the representation of women from the object to subject. Although a mark grappled with the dilemmas faced by the many South Asian painters, how to fork modern artistic identity while negotiating with the weight of tradition, the experiences of war and displacement in 1990s profoundly transformed his search for self. This period marked a decisive turn in his practice. His pen and drawings on newsprint papers, his paintings on glossy, brightly colored magazine papers signaled this shift with striking clarity. During the Sri Lankan government's economic embargo in Jaffna, then under the control of LTTE, the basic art materials and stationeries become scarce. In response, Mark turned his discarded everyday objects, magazine pages imported from China and Russia, PVC pipe and empty plastic bottles. These throwaway materials become the ground for and substance of his artwork. Rather than erasing the printed image already present on the magazine page, he engaged them directly, absorbing their textures, shapes, color, and narrative formats into its own visual language. Through this process, he folded mediated imagery of global circulation into the intimate live realities of war, creating a layered representation of everyday life under siege. The displacement of Tamil communities both within and the displacement of Tamil communities both within and beyond Sri Lanka dismantled the notions of identity noted in nationality, citizenship, and geographical territory, collective history, and memory. As a result, categories of identity become unstable, while the coexistence of conflicting planes and selves became real. In this context, as Ernest Renan observed in different settings, suffering itself became a thread of connection. Meanwhile, ruptures in the social fabric and various forms of censorship compelled artists to turn inwards, foregrounding personal histories as symbolic and metaphorical narrations. Violence, torture, and loss, refugee life, uncertainty, trauma become everyday realities. Tamil identity was not only targeted and suppressed during the riots and civil wars, but also actively resisted, transforming survival into the act of defense and continuity. In this context, anti-Tamil program, civilians, and the security discourses of both state and non-state actors transformed the Tamil body into the figure of suspicion, stranger, traitor, and suspect. This transformation was enacted through the violence and torture, which inscribed repression directly onto the body. Many artists turned his own bodies as a reference, depicting self-torture as a means of articulating collective suffering. Our Vaidehi's work integrate perceived notions of identity in an ethnically polarized Sri Lankan society. She examined how Tamil identity is exchanged, valued, devalued, handled, and scrutinized by the state through the paper documents. In her work, Stranger in Her Own Land, she collaged identity cards, police registration certificates, and other documents crucial to the day-to-day existence of the Tamil during the war, showing how the self reduced to the landscape of paperwork. In her later works, created after permanently relocating her into India, she placed her self-portrait against a static, cold backdrop of jungle of buildings. The disconnection between the figure and the location produce a palpable sense of strangeness and loneliness. Caste politics. Although the artist from Madras Movement belongs to the multiple caste backgrounds, the Southern Indian identity overshadowed their linguistic and ethnic and caste identities at the beginning. Their rural experience were not separable from their experience of caste. Many of the Dalit artists associated with Madras Movement in pre-1980s rarely expressed their caste identity in their work openly. After creation of the linguistic-based states in post-independence India, the Madras College was brought under the control of Director of Technical Education, and they made college exclusive for the people of Tamil Nadu. This also brought the college under the state government's policy on implementation of caste-based reservation in students intake and staff recruitment. Since Tamil Nadu is the state having maximum percentage of caste-based reservations in India, it affects the existing caste composition of the college. Hence, the Madras College must be the only art institution that having maximum number of scheduled caste students enrollment. This slowly started changing the elitist formal aesthetics of Madras Movement. Dalit identity gained monumentum in politics as well as in the field of literature in the mid-1980s. This encouraged the caste consciousness among the art community in Tamil Nadu. In 1995, in the meeting at Dalit Theological Seminary in Madurai, artist Chandru, then principal of Madras College of Art, along with the Dalit woman writer Sivahami, called for Dalit identity in art, defined by its authorship, its subject matter, and its orientation. Later, Ramanathapuram riots, election-related violence in Papapatti and Kiripatti, and the massacre of Murugesan led to the organization of painting exhibition and release of booklet titled Erium Varnangal, Burning Hues, by the Dalit artist in early 2000. Chandru with his 4 female students by visiting the sites of Ramanathapuram riots in 1998, in which the houses and the business establishment were looted and burned down with a loss of 11 lives in police firing and rioting, made series of paintings condemning murderous atrocities against the Dalit community. In a painting titled Police, Chandru painted 3 policewomen carrying their collections in their helmets from the burning Dalit houses. Absence of Dalit bodies or substitution of them with the burning houses, beams in the plain white background mark the communal tension in the air. Emphasize and the emptiness and the stiffness in the painting implicitly expose the silence of institutionalized social justice, connected with violence and the state apparatus. In India, unlike in Sri Lanka, ethnicity is not an officially codified category within the state documentation. Even after the linguistic reorganization of the states, the question of who qualified as a Tamilian has remained open at the level of personal identification. As a result, Tamil identity in Tamil Nadu does not function like a caste identity, which is bureaucratically recorded and socially enforced. Instead, Tamilness operate as a collective sensibility rooted in language, cultural memory, and shared affect, rather than as a certified or state authorized category as it is in Sri Lanka. Because of this openness, the performance and the articulation of Tamil identity vary significantly across personal, social, and political context. Individuals navigate multiple intersecting identities: caste, class, gender, sexuality, region, and religion and nationality, and mobilize them creatively strategically in response to the shifting situation. The question of how people prioritize one identity over the other becomes particularly revealing, highlighting the fluid, context-dependent nature of belonging in Tamil Nadu. This fluidity contrasts sharply with the more rigid state-recognized ethnic categories in Sri Lanka, where Tamil identity carried legal, political, and historical weight. Visual media operates beyond the boundaries of linguistic geographies, enabling forms of communication that do not rely on the shared verbal language. In Tamil Nadu, the state has historically deployed visual culture to advance official narrative of the ethnic identity, using images of to stabilize and disseminate particular ideological position. However, at the personal level, artists have mobilized their visual medium in far more diverse and contest way. This practice ranged from resistance to resilience to every eyewitness's testimony, reporting, and documentation. These varied use of reflect the subjective positions of individual artists who engage the visual field not as a passive recipients of the state narrative, but as an active agents shaping alternative meaning and counter histories. In contemporary art, identity formation is shaped not only by the individual intention, but also by the institutional forces that form the artistic production. The art market, the heritage industry, and the discipline of artistry all influence which identities are made visible and legible. As Stuart Hall reminds us, such positions are never neutral. They require more nuanced questions about how identities are produced, circulated, and contested within this system of representation. In the 20th century Tamil-speaking world, the burden of exhibiting coherent visual identity became deeply entangled with the historical shift from anti-colonial struggle to post-colonial nation building. This transition reshaped how artists negotiate representation, legitimacy, and cultural expectation, forcing them to navigate the competing demands of the political visibility, cultural authenticity, and state-produced narratives of belonging. The development that emerged in 1980s in Sri Lanka and 1990s in Tamil Nadu marked the decisive rupture. Artists in these contexts actively unmade both the nation and the inherited category of Tamil identity, refusing the stabilizing myth of past. Taken together, these trajectories reveal that what I have already outlined is not merely a descriptive account, but the foundation for a much larger theoretical investigation into the politics of minoritarian visuality, the instability of cultural identity, and the aesthetic strategies through which Tamil artists confronted and dismantled the regimes that sought to define them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sana, for that wonderful talk and a lot of thought-provoking ideas. The floor is open for questions, comments. Yeah, it's open. Want to sit? Or you can stand. It's okay. I mean, whichever. Yes, please. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for your lecture, and yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge from what you collected over the years. So I'm curious. For context, I'm Sri Lankan Tamil girl, but I was born in Canada. So to me, when listening to your lecture, I was trying to understand it from the perspective of just kind of like the glimpses of what I know based on my visits to Jaffna and time spent in Madras as well. And I was trying to kind of understand and relate. And I guess for context, I would love to hear like, where did your journey begin in the world of art? And I'm assuming you were born in Sri Lanka as well. How did art influence you from a young age, and what made you even go into the field of art? And I guess a part two of that would be, my limited understanding is that I understand what happened during the war and how did art in Jaffna, how did it shift during those times? And yeah, if you could talk a bit about that, just to have a bit of context as I take away all this information, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, he wants to take one more question. If there's one. Frank.
Thank you very much. Just building off of that, I guess I would ask also, what aesthetic sort of movements have we seen since the so-called post-war era? I mean, however you want to mark that. Is it even a break in terms of how people are approaching the question of making visual art and the question of identity in particular?
Okay, thank you. For the first question, actually, I came to the scene during these 80s, like the 80s transformation happening in terms of whole idea of like in a middle class Jaffna society or Sri Lankan Tamil society, getting the occupation of medicine, engineering, lawyer, or law as a kind of a prime aim of the community. Still, that is there happening in the diaspora. So, so within that, there is no space for art making and all these things. So, my family is also strict into that, and they were not allowed me to do all kinds of things. But this spark happening in the 80s actually made me to think more boldly about my future in terms of this decision. So it's because of that shift I'm talking about 80s actually make my life totally change. And that was not a kind of easy decision. Then you have to compromise, you have to negotiate each and every time with the society because you become an abnormal in the society. And still now you are a kind of abnormal because my university job actually associated with their expectation, but my artistic job not associated with their expectation. So you play both ways and navigate this whole set of the whole thing. So that's number one. So the second question he was asking about the post-war, actually this trend actually continued. And most of these people were, like in my case, I'm also a kind of a passive observer of the war. It's not, my family is not directly like affected, but not lost members of family or something like that, or not or situated in a kind of refugee camp for many years and things like that, or brought up in a refugee camp many years. But this generation of artists actually came from that kind of an experience. So they are actually talking about what has happened to them. And they are inscribing those into a kind of visual thing. So that's the whole thing. So they are not living in a kind of very imaginative world. They are actually representing their presence or their actual reality. So that's the kind of shift. So they are, and also rethinking about what has happened to them. There's one artist very popularly doing her work. It's like based on, actually she was displaced when she was young. And then he grown up in a refugee camp in Vaunia. And now she entered the university to study art. And after that, now she's practicing and her work is about her house under the high security zone. So this kind of a personal my generation of artists or the generation before me actually had this big question about how to make our art more authoritative or authentic in terms of bring. And a lot of people ask me also, like when I draw, because in our art education, our art education is a kind of common art education as in the whole of the world. So we also learn Renaissance and other kinds of things. So I have a kind of, someone told me a very important architect from Colombo, and he's actually glorified for his structures of vernacular modernism. And he asked me, he actually pointed me saying, your work is not Sri Lankan art because you have a lot of influence of European art. So I said, European is also my heritage because through art education, I learned these techniques and artistry and things like that. So it's become part and parcel of it. But I was actually painting war during that time, a trauma. But he actually formalistically understanding, I'm not doing a Tanjavur painting or temple mural. That was his complaint. So yeah, so this was a kind of a reaction in also kind of a expectation from our side when we were getting into the field. But I don't know whether the present generation is having this one. It's very much rooted in contemporarity. Yeah.
Yes.
So this builds on what you just said. What is it like for you to also be an artist yourself and to teach art? So how do you kind of move between your role as someone who does art and who also teaches it, so as a professor and as an artist himself? And the second one, just now and even in your lecture, you mentioned the art school as an institution. Could you say a little bit more about that, the history of the art school as an institution?
So the first one, when I get into the field, I was thinking about becoming a kind of an artist, but you can't survive with art. So that's the kind of situation we are having. Now the situation is slightly different, but when we entered the scene, it was like it's not a kind of a profit-making or money-making business. So in that case, you need a kind of a second job. And I thought like I can become an art teacher in a school or something. That when I got into the university, I was thinking, that's my option must be in a school teacher or something. That's how I negotiated with my parents also. Okay, in the end, I can at least become an art teacher with the government salary and pension, everything assured. That's what the middle class want. So that was a case. But when I joined the university, that time was a kind of after the big exodus, and lot of communities actually displaced and move out of Jaffna, and there was a kind of little growing of kind of a heritage business. So they are actually looting from these houses and started selling and all these things. So heritage became a kind of a big problem there. So when I joined also, I was thinking there are very little number of artists living here, and what sort of artistry I can teach, and what is a kind of a role of artistry in this kind of a little places. But suddenly I found a kind of an answer to my question. Okay, I have a kind of role to play. So that actually started shaping my whole practice. So as an artist as well as an art historian, my whole practice is actually shaped by the local context. So it's like whether you are working in an international museum or writing an international paper, that's not important. How you are reacting to the own situation is becomes so important to me. So that's how I entered, and that's how I'm managing. So even teaching artistry, so what we teach and what we select and what kind of example we showed, it's also like to make the students to understand their own condition, like not only artistic condition, artistic production, but also their social, political conditions, and relate that to the kind of a larger history through art. The second question you ask about
Institution.
Art school. Yeah, so art school. So in India, the better person is here who wrote about, who actually worked on Madras College of Art in the colonial time. Diwan is with us, so she can also answer to this question. But in post independent India, in particular, art schools played a major role as a kind of a meeting point of the artist. And a whole nationalist thought and the art movement actually came from that. If you can locate most of the Indian contemporary modern artist movement from related to one school of art. So, but in Sri Lanka, this was not the case. Sri Lanka actually remained as a colonial, art school remained as a kind of colonial space. All the avant-garde actually came outside of the art school. But in India, most of the avant-garde actually operated within the art schools. So that's an important thing. So art school in that case, it's not only a kind of a teaching space, it's also a space of exchange, like a kind of companionship and exhibition space and all these things. And also the way the institution that connects with you, with the local community and things like that. And also then also in the kind of when middle class entered into the art schools, that certificate the art schools offered also play a role in social mobilization. So that's very important. So in one way, like in 80s Jaffna, when we were planning to enter the art schools, that time there was no art school in Jaffna. So, and there was an art school in Colombo. Only art school actually came into existence in late 1891 or something like that in Colombo. And that was catering its course in English. But in 1976, after 1956 Sinhala Only Act, they made the whole art education also into Sinhala. That actually refused the entry of the Tamils into the art education. So from 1976 to Then University of Jaffna started its art program in 1998. That 20 years, there was a big gap and there's no artists. Few of us went outside and learned. That's a kind of a thing. So an art institution is very important, like a kind of a actor in the whole art world in the sense. So this is actually a kind of a lapse in our thing. Now it's restarted. So it's like now it become a kind of the Jaffna University's one is a kind of a catering all the peripheral students. Even a girl from a plantation area and she actually learned from us, and she must be the first painter painter from this plantation. So that actually made possible because of this kind of institutional building. Yes.
Yes. It's here first, and sorry, I saw.
Vanakkam, thank you for this talk. It was quite insightful because you trace the Tamil identity across a whole century. And the pressures of the colonial, you trace from governmentality to showcasing the ethnic identity in like Tanjavur paintings, to Dalit and Elam artists as counter history. My question is there a possibility for tracing a simultaneous tracing of non-identity? And here I'm saying non-identity where being Tamil results in not just being identified as a Tamil subject of the state, but as an anonymous force, historical force that we've known as being ethical, that being Tamil has always been about being ethical. And this is something like a simultaneous commonality, like common thread that has been, you can see through the artists as well, right? As much as we carry this identity, I want us to, I think it's like an unsaid acknowledgement. I'm sure we all sort of understand it. There has been this other sort of anonymous ethics that's not really identity at the same time. So just any thoughts about it? Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I think Charan also written about this, about Tamil identity and Tamilness. So he was actually talking about what you mentioned in the last, like ethical standpoint as a kind of an alternative for being a Tamil differently. And also like whatever the examples I gave in the last this thing, and also like the Dalit movement I mentioned, also what they said was it's not about Dalits, it's about kind of a human emancipation. And they are also having a larger collective with non-Dalits now. And this whole, this movement called Neelam, which so that Neelam is actually talking about association with other caste groups and all these things who are having a kind of a similar kind of an ethical standpoint. Now, the problem here is this. So even the artists, like I answered for the 90s and the late 90s artists who came from post-war artists. So they're not answering directly to this ethnic question or something like that, but they're responding their own situation. Yeah, but in the end, when you entered with the art market and when your work started circulating, then they started structuring you in a kind of a different mode. And artists also now started, so that's a kind of another force now. So yeah, as a student, you don't have a problem, but after that, when you mature, then you have this kind of other actors started playing in your own work. Yeah, so it's like, so being ethical is one reason, but I don't know whether in this kind of an art situation and art market, I'm not talking about a political, social, and other kind of apparatus, but even within the art market and art world, whether existing like that is possible, that's a real question. Because they are labeling you again and again for their own interest and all this. They not in a kind of bigger way, like one exhibition curator come and they wanted to put something on something on war-related stuff. Then they label you, even if you don't want to label, they label you, and then it's become a kind of stigma. That's the whole thing.
Hi, thanks for the talk. So you highlighted a little bit the architectural, the deployment of the Dravidian idiom in post-colonial, mid-20th century, monumental and institutional architecture. Have you seen any subsequent development along those lines, either in those forms of architecture or in, say, domestic or infrastructural architecture?
Yeah, there are interesting points. Like the Dravidian the DMK actually started this whole classification of public buildings. But later on, I think 10 years ago, Karunanidhi built another state assembly, which is not belongs to any traditional architectural references. But what they did was, it's a very high modern architecture. He made the state assembly, and then later on, Jayalalitha came into power, and she actually moved the assembly from that new building to the old building, and that became a hospital or something like that. But if you go and look at it, then you find the material selection. Through material selection, they have this statement. This is actually oriented at Tamil aesthetics based on material, use of material, or recontextualizing that material in architectural form. But in terms of form, like in terms of decoration, they actually got away from the earlier Dravidian model. Similarly, now what they're doing is like if, they have created 2-3 museums in Keeladi and other archaeological sites in which they are not following the classical mode. They are actually looking at domestic architecture of traditional Tamil Nadu. So it's very interesting. So they are actually turning that into domestic architecture. So in a few years back, Jaffna University built a ceremonial entrance, adapting the classical elements as well as the domestic architecture. Because we don't want anything classical, because that actually deviate or like divide people. So we thought, like, what are the kind of collective elements we are having in terms of domestic having all over Sri Lanka and mainly in Jaffna, across caste, class, and all kinds of things. And we put together, but there was a kind of opposition for that. They said this is not Tamil.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you very much for the wonderful talk, actually. I'm still trying to figure out the question, but so it's not very well formed. I find it that there are kind of, two very big story, 1 century of a story you are trying to tell us about it. And there are 2 major parts. One is about Tamil Nadu, one is about Sri Lanka, about an Elam. In Tamil Nadu story, it is, the burden which you are trying to articulate is about, it's not a homogenized burden. This is the question which I'm trying to get it from it. Because the Tamil Nadu, the question of burden, it's about, or the architecture, whatever you spoke about it, the Valluvar or Marina statues and all, it's all related with reclaiming the space. But that's not the same with the Elam question. Elam question is mostly about, showing the violence which the people have gone through and so on. So the burden of an artist here and there, I find there is a kind of a very big differences between it. And also this is a very underlying question which is behind is the state. The Tamil Nadu state role is very different, and the Sri Lankan people, what they've gone through is a very different story. So what is the role of a state? Does state play a role in differentiating what is Tamil identity? So that's my one question, if I frame it really right way. The second question is related with an artist. There are certain artists who traveled between Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka. There is a huge interaction between an artist in a very recent history. So what they are trying to think about Tamil, is there any way they are trying to think Tamil as one identity between the Sri Lanka and Tamil, or like people like Marudu and so on? I'm trying to think like that.
Yeah. So the first question is very interesting. As you said, this reclaiming the identity in Tamil Nadu by putting the sculptures in, that trend also appeared in Sri Lanka. For example, the 4th Tamil conference, the Marina Beach was actually decorated with this literary personalities, and in the 6th conference or something in 1974 in Jaffna, they did the same thing. And they actually planted the Tamil classical writers as well as the local writers. And later, after 80s, the border cities, border towns like Vavuniya and Batiklo actually marked further. They also adapted this for demark the areas. Oh, this is a Tamil area. Claim that there's no entry for others. So that kind of thing. Now that same
the same thing is played by the religion, actually. Now it's a kind of religious war happening. So they are planting their icons everywhere, in like Buddha statue to Hindu iconography to Christian imageries and all these things. But previously, this was a kind of a ethnic boundaries, and ethnic boundaries are marked by these authors. That's an interesting thing. So this actually happened, but how actually these things were actually supported in Sri Lanka is another question. So it's a more a kind of community effort than a kind of a state effort in that kind. And in that case, we are like a kind of a stateless people. So it's all coming from a kind of a stateless kind of a situation. So that having a kind of totally different kind of effect because of the economy behind that and things like that. So now diaspora played a major role in that, and local businessmen played a major role in that. That's also kind of a plus and minus. And in some cases, they also reflect things happening in Tamil Nadu. There's an issue came after the saffronization of Thiruvalluvar in Tamil Nadu. But in Jaffna, from the beginning itself, Thiruvalluvar with the saffronized kind of symbols. So we never thought like Thiruvalluvar is a Jain thing. We thought it's a kind of a Hindu thing. And like in 80s and 60s, in popular reproduction and all these things, he was wearing the holy ashes and things like that. And we never realized that. Even I found in my university question paper, there was a Hindu-related subject. They were asking Hindu ethics question paper. They're asking questions on the Tirukural. I was a little bit confused. How come Tirukural come under Hindu this kind? So this differentiation is not in a kind of public, but it's actually started reflecting. Some cases we wanted to repeat. In Tamil Nadu, this became a controversy, so we also make this as a kind of controversy. That is actually reflecting. That is also there. But in general, there's a kind of distinction in that and this, like, how do you feel? So these are kind of like even not only identity-based sculpture project or something like that, but if you look at the temples, if you look at the schools, if you look at other kinds of social organizations, all are community projects, not all are government projects actually. And later on, the government took over those things, like the public library projects. In 1934, some individuals started the Jaffna Public Library, and Jaffna Museum was started by another individual. And later on, it's all taken over by the government. And the second question is about how exchanges and these things are happening. I don't know. There are sympathizers in Tamil Nadu. They actually represent Elam and all these things. There are some artists claim they are also like putting the images taken with Prabhakaran and all these things, website and all these things. But we didn't get a chance to go closer to the movement as such for many reasons. So it's like people also use that for different their own political agendas, so they were like very strong sympathizers of Elam war. But I won't say that as taking that into an artistic sphere in a very collaborative manner. And also unfortunately, the Madras College of Art closed the door for all the other states, including Sri Lanka, including Sri Lankan Tamils. So it's only for Tamil. Now, very recently, they opened up for economical reasons. But that also stopped us, stop us from that kind of exchanges.
Yes.
Thank you for this talk. I feel like I've learned such a wonderful Tamil artist just through the tracing that you did of history. My question speaks to the present. I would love to know how you feel about the cultivation of artists in Elam today, and are you inspired or hopeful by art production?
Yeah, so after the starting of the course in Jaffna University and later on after the end of the war, and particular kind of students started coming as into the institution, and they carried a burden of something else like the trauma and memory and all these things. So it's become a kind of a tool for coming out from the whole thing. So it's like so they actually started retelling their war experiences through art. So one way actually at the beginning from 2009 to 2020 or something like that, we thought that it's progressing very well, but now that become marketable.
that become marketable. The other players started involving in that, and it's like you can't control over it. So that's a kind of a problem. And also the circulation is not within Sri Lanka or within Tamil speaking world. Circulation is much, much bigger than what we are expecting. And you can't stop, you can't ask people to do, not to do that actually at the same time. So it's a kind of tricky game now. They also sell their own stories for money, and they also sell other stories for money. Even people who are not affected by the war started telling about war and started acting that they underwent war and things like that. So because war become a kind of another label for marketing. So you create your own. So in the end, then your identity is created for the market. And also the international curators want something instantly and something like lasting. So you wanted to give more traumatized stories to them to get a kind of a chance in a big exhibition or something like that.
Thank you so much for that talk as well. My question is more around the exchanges or interactions between the diaspora and the emerging artists in Elam, or in particular Jaffna. Are you seeing much of that? What challenges or tensions do those interactions or exchanges sort of experience between the two sort of lived experiences and worlds?
No, that actually started happening slowly. It's a very rare chance to Elam artists to come to diaspora sites. So most of the visiting diaspora, in many cases, their families actually don't want to, their parents actually came out of Sri Lanka with a kind of a bad memory, so they didn't want to come back. But the diaspora artists actually tried and came. There are artists, they were from UK and other places, people started, Norway, and all these people started waiting. And there are also, they actually having a kind of a small funding for these exchange projects and all these things, through which there are exchanges now started happening. And there are also because of the Zoom meetings and all these things made it possible after COVID. And then this kind of exchange is happening over the Zooms and things like that. That is also happening. So if you compare with the whole from 2009 to now, there's a kind of a growth in that. There is a stable growth in that. And there is also people coming for their own research and looking at these things for their own art production. That is happening separately. But there are people who are actually involved, specifically from diaspora. They are also in search of their root and things like that. At the same time, they also engage with the local artists. So that exchanges are happening in a kind of limited way, but it's happening. Yeah. And also there are also other kinds of things happening in Sri Lanka, where there is a new museum called Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Sri Lanka, in Colombo, which is actually started showcasing diaspora artists continuously. So that's number one. And recently my department actually produced a dissertation on diaspora artists, Tamil artists. That must be the first dissertation, where we started accumulating information about who were the artists living around the world. That was first thing. So we may be able to teach that in a kind of a future, at least a kind of one lecture or something on Tamil diaspora. Yeah.
Can you speak to the tension between Tamil artists in Elam, Sri Lanka, and other community of artists like Muslims and Sinhalese artists, or how are they all, I guess, either cooperating with each other, or having dialogues, or responding to each other's arts?
Yeah, so this, so I think after 80s, what is happening in the north is also happening in the south, because of the JVP insurgency and other political movements. And they also had a kind of similar route in that way. So there is a kind of a understanding in both sides, but I find, so that actually gave a space for us. So there are artist collective exhibiting artists from the Northeast and all these things become very normal. But I don't know whether our subjective positions are same or not. That's a real question, because their affiliation with the state, and as I mentioned before, they are having a state, and we are stateless. In that case, what kind of exchange is possible in a kind of asymmetrical way? So that is a kind of a real question, which they may be not even understanding, and it's like a kind of government publicity. Oh, we are all equal in that way. But there are other issues for them. It's the war is over. And there is no bomb blast in Colombo.
But for us, it's kind of archaeological projects and new Buddhist findings and Buddhist archaeology and encroachments happening, land grabbing, and all these things are become a kind of issue. So it's like for us, war is happening in a different form. So that tension they are not able to understand. But there is no open conflict as such. Actually, we work together, we exhibit together, and most of the Tamil artists with this kind of stories exhibiting in Colombo. And most of the Colombo, they are selling their work in Colombo art galleries, and they are promoted by the Colombo art galleries and curators to international scenes and things like that. So it's happening. But so whether it's real, that's the whole question. Oh, it's only in terms of market.
So you mentioned this topic of what's real versus what's for the market, which is something that is very new to me. So among all the noise, how would you say is the best way to identify the signals in terms of who are the more or who is producing authentic art, especially in Sri Lanka or in how do you identify, especially from being so far away, who is coming from a more authentic perspective versus what is
So I don't know whether there is something called authenticity in this context. To answer this, that's number one, or whether I can decide upon that thing, that's another thing. But what we are actually doing is like this discussion, last discussion about commercialization and art making, and in the beginning, even the works I was mentioning about Arundhati's works about the massacre and the IPK presence, and Mark's works about political, so the aerial bombing and the war and all these things. That time there was no art market in Jaffna, so they were only actually forced by shaped by the political and social conditions and their own impulse towards expression. That's the only thing. That was the only driving force, but not that case. So what I found is so what to do in this kind of situation. We actually had a kind of discussion in last 2-3 years. We encountered this in different locations, and I stopped exhibiting with many of the galleries and all these things. Not having any fights or anything like that. I find no point exhibiting with them. It's like you say something in your art, and you don't question those things happening within the art world. You keep quiet. So that's the kind of situation. So I just withdraw myself from this thing. But what we thought, so we were in a kind of situation, what to do. You can't say someone to don't exhibit or that and this and all. They have to take their decision. That is part of the whole thing. So what we thought is we can organize a kind of a space where this kind of a discussions can happen in a larger way. And there are also possibilities for people to look at art, not through museums, not through commercial galleries, not through curated shows, but just directly see artwork. If we can create a kind of space where people can directly interact with. So many of the local artists talk about local scenes, local situation, but they all exhibit outside Jaffna or outside Colombo or Sri Lanka. And in the end, even my works are shown somewhere else, not shown in Jaffna. So we thought we need a kind of avenue, not non-profitable avenue, where people can come and see if they really want. So we recently opened that. And now around 20 artists voluntarily gave, because they all have this kind of tension. They all wanted to have something with the local. So they all voluntarily coming, and they're not asking anything, no contracts, nothing. We will put together and have a show. We recently opened a space for that, where public can come and interact. And even when we were putting the light, we were thinking about not putting a gallery lights and things like that. We wanted to become a very normal domestic space kind of a thing. We wanted to create. We don't want to give an impression of a museum.
Thank you so much for this. I was just wondering, since we're talking about spaces that are not conventional spaces where you see such art, are there spaces, but I'm specifically interested in Jaffna, where other kinds of art share space with visual art, like music, performance art, dance, theater? Are there spaces currently that are sharing space, and also art that responds to what's happening or what has happened, Are there spaces that exist?
Yeah, so this Indian government-sponsored project of Cultural Center is one of that projects actually, but it's not actually the architect and the early the people who are engaged with the project in an early stage was imagining as this kind of interactive space. That must be one of the very rare space in entire South Asia now available to us. We have a kind of theater space, we have a kind of an art museum space and gallery space, and like a 7th floor learning tower which incorporate all the digital spaces and experimental work and all kinds of things, and also refreshment areas and all. But now what is happening is they can't be able to run the space because it's so expensive. So they have started renting it, and so it is not a kind of a cultural production. It's a kind of marketing place now. So that's a tragedy now. So because they are not able to, the municipal council is not able to handle the whole thing, and India and Sri Lankan governments are playing their own games in that case. So now it's not belongs to you. So it's very interesting. That's after ceremonial opening, the key was given to the president of Sri Lanka, and president of Sri Lanka came to Jaffna to receive the key, but still the Indian government operates the back door. So if you want to book the auditorium, you have to write to them. Because they said we are not able to handle it, and they are the people who are able to handle it. So that's a kind of irony. So this is a kind of very soft diplomacy get into a kind of a bad shape. So that's number one. That's I think a very ideal space for this. And the entire space, the architectural space was very beautiful. It's open. It's very democratic. There's no fence. It's open. Anyone can go and gather, sit and talk, and anything you can do. That kind of a space. But now they started putting up fences and all these things. They're saying it's not security devices in a kind of trouble and all things. But the architect was the Sinhalese architect. He came in a kind of competition and won the project, and he did the project, wonderful project. But there's another organization supported by the German Cultural Center called Kalam. It's a house. It's also a kind of exchange place. So they also exhibit artworks from outside. And also you can just go and do kind of like interdisciplinary kind of experimentation in that space. So apart from that, there are other institutions where they have these 2-3 art forms happening in a similar kind of manner. They have exhibition space, they have auditorium and other kinds of things. But I don't know whether they are still having kind of an idea of collaboration and things like that. Yes.
Thank you for your talk, of course. I was thinking about what you were saying about the architect who said that your art wasn't Tamil enough because you had influence of European methods. And it reminds me of a conversation that I had when I was in Jaffna with the drama professor and a bunch of young women university students from the university. And they were saying to the drama professor and me that they wanted more indie Tamil movies, like not Nadams, because it's too dramatic and they can't relate to it. And the drama professor had said that their desire for that, like for more indie films or whatever, was an influence of neocolonialism. And so I'm curious as to like how the tension of preservation and renewal of Tamil art and more broadly a Tamil identity is being negotiated right now in Jaffna or in Sri Lanka more broadly.
Yeah, it's a very complicated question. But in 1930s or 40s, somebody was writing, I think first Tamil art historian, writing about this whole project of Indianization as decolonization. Because for us, it's the only way to Indianize yourself to become decolonial. So that was a kind of thing. Now it's become a kind of problem. And also the decolonial project also related to religious revivalism and all these things. Now, if you do it, it's Hindutva. So we are in a kind of a totally different kind of political mapping and also a kind of different kind of dialogue with the tradition and so this tension is always there, whether you wanted to repeat Indian or something, but the mass is always with Indian, this kind of thing. Yeah, so that actually this discussion is actually happening in a kind of a very smaller circle. Yeah.
Any final questions, if anybody? The last question. Okay.
My last question. My last question was, so you mentioned that the first art school in Jaffna only opened in 1998, which is pretty recent from my perspective. And I'm I'm assuming, do you work, is the art school part of University of Jaffna, or is it a separate art school? So since it did open pretty recently or later on in history, how would you say it is today in terms of whether how big the school is or how it's progressing, and how would you like to see it grow in the coming years or in the future from where it's at right now?
Yeah, so the art school is very recent, but there are artist-run schools, little schools throughout the history that actually fill this project, like gaps. So that is a kind of very political project. So some artists actually not only engage with art production, they also engage with art teaching. In 60s, there was an artist called M.S. Kandeya, who was a lecturer at the Colombo Art School. And he thought that after the 1956 Single-Only Act, there's no future for Tamils. So we have to start our own. So he started his own art school. It's a weekend school. And he was actually supporting. He used to come to, like Saturday, Sundays, he come from Colombo to Jaffna and teach and go. And that was a kind of an initial starting. Then later on, and also before that, in 1934, this Windsor Art Club, also a kind of, they were also conducting art classes for some British exams, preparing them for British exams and to become a kind of an art teachers. So, but it's later on that project is actually turned into a kind of middle class project of becoming a teacher than a kind of an artist. But the initial aim was to make that education possible to these people. So this is a kind of a relay still happening through that. Yeah, now it's like, now there's an art institution, but whether that art institution is doing its critical job in this particular moment that's another question. It did it for some time, but now it's also a certificate awarding institution. So you have to find some other spaces. And also, but now as a teacher, there's a big question, what's the relevance of art education in our present society, and what kind of education is possible? Like, I'm not saying there's no relevance to art education, but the traditional mode of education is not possible at all in terms of art. And there are other, not only new mediums are like coming into being, but also new ways of learning and all these things also happening. So yeah, so in that case, like whether the institution is reorienting in that kind of a situation, that's another thing. So this happened to Madras College of Art much earlier, before the internet and before they became outdated. So they were not in the scene. Like they were that's a first colonial school in South Asia, but after 70s, no history. But they produce, they all become commercial artists. They're all very successful in commercial filmmaking as an art directors and supporters and things like that, but not in a kind of an avant-garde art practices and things like that. Yes. Yeah, so that is the other thing. So we define art, we define a certain courses according to certain benchmarks. But maybe students get into something else without our expectation and all this, and then we say, no, this is not a successful course. So that's the other kind of thing. So yeah, these are now, there are a lot of openings happening. So where to place this art education? That's a very tricky question.
Okay, I think with that 7:30 exactly, please join me thanking Sanatanan for wonderful talk. And thank you everyone.